Welcome to the Live Big podcast, where real estate expert Nick Paynes shows you that everyone can build wealth through real estate investing. Nick and his featured guests will give you the tools, resources, and expert information you need to leverage real estate into a wealth-building strategy, so you can stop worrying about your 9-to-5 and start to live big. Here's Nick with today's episode.
All right. Welcome, everybody, back to the Live Big podcast. Today, it is just me. We've got a fun episode today, though. It's a little bit different format. We're going to do a Ask Me Anything format. So I've got a list of commonly heard questions, things that I get from my clients, from people that ask about my real estate investing experiences. I've kind of compiled a list of about 10 or 11 questions or so, and I'm going to go over them with y'all today. So let's get started. Let me find my questions here. All right. So to start, I think that one of the most common questions that I get is the "don't you hate dealing with clients" or "don't you hate dealing with tenants" question. And what do you do with unreasonable tenants? So first, the short answer is no. Tenants are people just like anybody else, right? So you treat them with respect, and for the most part, they'll treat you with respect. And so one of the things that I talk to my tenants about when they come in is I let them know a couple of things. I say, first of all, I want you to know that I'll treat you just like I would treat my family. So if your furnace goes out and it's so cold in the property that there's no way I would let my family stay there, I won't let you stay there, which means I will put you up in a hotel for the night. I'll go out and buy a bunch of space heaters for you to heat the property, and I'll just find a way to make it comfortable for you. So I'll treat you like my family. If my family wouldn't live there, I wouldn't allow anybody else to live there either. So, and I think that goes a long way. If you show that mutual respect for people, if you respect them, they'll respect your property. So, and what do you do with unreasonable tenants? This can happen from time to time. And again, I think unreasonable is subjective, right? Some people feel like they're being reasonable, and we feel like they're being unreasonable. So how do you deal with that? I'll give a more recent example of a conflict that I ran into on one of my rental properties. The conflict was that the person who lives in the property opened the garage door and backed into the garage door because it hadn't opened completely. So the garage door only opened, maybe 5/6 of the way, and left a small amount of garage door hanging down. And when they backed out, they caught the garage door and they broke it. Now, it's an old wood garage door. It's not really something that can be repaired. It is cause for the entire garage door needed to be replaced. Now, the tenant called and said, "Hey, the garage door is broken." And I said, "Okay, what happened?" And said, "Well, we backed into it and it broke, and now it won't go back into place or won't, open or close fully." And I said, "Okay, what would you like to do about that?" And he said, "Well, we want it fixed." I said, "Okay." I basically told them that because that was not the fault of the property being not working properly, or was not my issue, that it was their issue and that they needed to pay the replacement cost. So they paid that, or they decided that wasn't fair. They didn't think it was fair because they said that the garage door opener hadn't been working properly for a couple of weeks now and wasn't opening the door all the way. To which I responded, "Then you should have let me know about that so that I could take care of it before the issue got worse." And so they still kind of disagreed. And I said, "Well, I think maybe we need to take some extra time to think about, for both of us to think about how we want to handle this situation, because obviously you don't agree and I don't agree." And ultimately, the road that we're going to have to take this down is a road that I think neither of us want to go down, which would be a legal road. And I knew that if I took it down a legal road, that I would win, because it's negligence on behalf of the tenant and backing into the garage door. So, but I don't really want to spend that time. I don't want to have that stress, and more importantly, I don't really want to upset my tenants either. I have to remember that they live in one of my most precious assets financially, and so they could cause a lot of damage in a very short period of time if I decided to push too hard or treat them poorly. Now, does that mean I'm going to give in and not do what I feel is right as far as being compensated for the broken door? Not necessarily, but I also want to make sure that we maintain a good relationship moving forward. So ultimately, what we ended up doing was we settled on paying half the cost. We each paid half the cost, which I feel on my behalf, and I'm sure they feel on their behalf too, but I feel on my behalf was more than fair. It was not my fault. If they backed into the garage door, it should be 100% their cost. And if we were to take that to court, I'm nearly certain that I would win. Okay. But I didn't want to go through that time constraint. I didn't want to put that pressure on my tenants. I didn't want to put that pressure on myself. So it's part of the cost of doing business, I suppose. So anyway, that stuff happens. We get into situations where we don't necessarily agree that we should have to take care of something, but sometimes you just do it to make the tenant happy and to make all parties happy moving forward. So, but outside of that, I don't think we don't really deal with a whole lot of negative tenants or unreasonable tenants. I think people, for the most part, if you respect them, they'll respect you. And if you take care of the property and you listen to their calls when they, and take action anytime they have, something wrong with the property, they'll take good care of your property. So, why don't you just get your real estate license so you can do your own deals and make even more money? Those were questions that I got before I had my real estate license. So they were right. I did. Now, originally, when I put this podcast together, we were going to have a second person on here, and Matt was going to be on the show. And I would ask him that same question. Matt, Charlie, why don't you guys just get your real estate licenses so you can do your own deals and make more money? And I think what you'd find coming from them is it's just not worth it, right? So it's nice once you have a good agent. It's nice kind of having that peace of mind that you don't have to worry about anything in the transaction. Somebody else is going to take care of you, and you don't have to worry about it. I'm even getting to that point in my life where, like, if I want to sell my own house or I want to sell one of my houses, like, I don't think I'll sell it. I think I'll hire another agent to sell it because I don't want to have to deal with it. Taking my emotion out of the sale helps. So I definitely see the value of even not having your license. Having someone else there to support you makes things a little bit easier. So that answers that question. Number 3 is, can I invest in real estate even if I don't have a lot of money? And the answer to that is yes. There are plenty of opportunities to get involved in real estate. One of them is through syndication. And syndication gives you the opportunity to be an operating partner, a general partner of a kind of more, usually a larger scale real estate operation, like multifamily commercial, things like that. But being a general partner, you can essentially get a portion of that deal just by contributing your skill set. So you don't necessarily have to have money. You can just contribute skill sets. So maybe you find the deal, or maybe you source other funds to fund the deal. Maybe you're really good at underwriting projects and making sure that they're good buys. Maybe you can be a property manager. You could be boots on the ground in that local area. So there's definitely ways that you can get involved in real estate without having to put any money into it. And so there are plenty of people around with lots of money that are looking for kind of runners or gophers to do some work for them and cut them into a deal. I have a partnership with two good friends of mine. They're a little older than I am, and they have a lot more money than I do. And so when I first got into the business, they were interested in potentially putting together a real estate partnership. And the deal would be that I wouldn't have to bring any money to the deal as long as I managed and took care of everything. So I would find the deals and get them closed. And if there needed to be any rehab, we would do the rehab. If we were flipping a property, I would take care of the flip. And they didn't have to really be involved. All they had to be involved with was money. And in return for that, they gave me a chunk of ownership of that company. And so it's really interesting looking back on that conversation and looking back on that partnership. I remember thinking at the time, man, these guys are dumb. They're giving me 30% of a deal I don't have to bring any money into. My return on this thing is infinite. All I have to do is take some time, And now that I've realized over the years that time is money and money is time. And so now I'm one of those people. Now I'm one of the people that's like, hey, I'll put money into the deal, but I don't want to have to put any work into it. And so now I realize the value of that. And looking back, those people that I work with now, where I'm putting the money in with it, I look at it and I go, man, I can't believe what a great deal I'm getting. This guy's running around doing all the work and I'm making 70%, 50% of the deal. Right. And so, and he feels this is the way I felt, years ago, which was, man, I can't believe he's giving me 30% to do all this. And I don't have to have any money in it. So it's all about perspective in life of where you're at. And so you most certainly can get into real estate. And if you're driven enough and you work hard enough and you get with the right people, there are certainly opportunities to go out and find deals and make money and present them to the right people without either A, having your license or B, having money. So question number 4, do I need a real estate agent when I'm buying investment properties? Not necessarily. You don't need a real estate agent ever if you don't want to. You can literally do any deal you want on your own. So needing a real estate agent and having a real estate agent or wanting a real estate agent are very different. And what I would recommend is that when you hire a professional, there's a couple reasons that you do it. You do it because it relieves some of the stress on you and things that you're having to do in order to get your transaction done. The other thing is the person that you hire should absolutely know more than you do. So even if you're a well-rounded or a seasoned or a veteran investor, having a second person to bounce ideas off of and having a person that knows what they're talking about, knows the market, and really understands the concepts that you're looking at to bounce ideas off of, that is incredibly valuable. And especially a plus if they're a great negotiator. So you get under contract and you get that person who is willing to go to bat for you. Those great negotiators can save you, thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. I recently negotiated a deal for Matt. This was end of last year, maybe mid to end of last year, that by the time we got done with it, after we were already, from list price and what we got under contract for, and then what we got, taken away after we were under contract, I think I saved Matt $180,000 on that deal. And so it can be really significant and more than pays for the cost of an agent, right? So I think it's extremely valuable that most professionals and high-end professionals, ones that understand their value and represent their value, I think there's a lot of benefit to having those people involved in your transactions, right? And that's why there's all kinds of brokers out there. There's shoe brokers out there. You want to get a really nice pair of shoes, collector shoes, like go to a shoe broker. Those people will find it, and they'll find it for cheaper than you could probably buy it for. They have those for cars. They have them for all kinds of different things, artwork. There's a reason that brokers exist for those, is because they have easier access to what you need. And they can do it usually cheaper than you can do it yourself. So, all right, next question, number 5. Should I invest in state or out of state? This is a great question. This comes down to your real estate goals and what you're trying to accomplish. And so, again, if you're trying to self-manage the property, and save money on property management fees. Maybe being out of state's probably not the best idea. But different states are going to offer different benefits from an investing standpoint. So Colorado, for example, is not a very good cash flow state, but it's a tremendous growth state. So we gain an incredible amount of appreciation and equity in our properties each year. But our cash flow numbers are all but non-existent, at least at this point. So you can still go out of state. I see deals all the time online for, who knows, places in Indiana and Mississippi and Louisiana and things like that, where, you go in and you're cash flowing $1,000 a month because you can buy a fourplex for like $120,000 and, rents are $500 a month. And so a mortgage on that's going to be under $1,000 a month, and you're getting $2,000 a month in rent. So there's different things that are available. The problem is that $120,000 quadplex 20 years from now is going to be worth about $120,000. So there's no appreciation. So you give up appreciation for great cash flow, and you give up cash flow for great appreciation sometimes. So sometimes it can be a balanced thing. You can buy a couple out of state, a couple in state, decide what you want to do. My mentality on this is to figure out where and when you want your money. So while you're young and you've got a good income, I don't think that cash flow should be important. I don't think it's something that you should look at and go, oh man, I got to have tons of cash flow. I think the idea is, how can I build as much wealth as I possibly can? And then I can re-leverage that growth, that wealth, right? So you buy $1 million worth of property, you let it go up 25% in value, and then you go borrow that 25% in value, and then you go buy another $1 million worth of real estate. So even if you're not cash flowing during this time, if you can just borrow money off of the other wealth that you've created, you can amass a significant amount of overall assets. And as we've talked about in the past, we talked about this in another one of our episodes, but if you could just amass $10 million worth of real estate, and even if it appreciated at 2% annually, that's $200,000 per year. And you could pull that equity out using a line of credit or using a cash out refinance, and you could just live on that. Just live on $200,000 a year, and that's a tax-free event. That cash out refinance is a tax-free event. So living on $200,000 tax-free just by amassing $10 million worth of real estate, of which you have 80% of it leveraged. So you really only have a net worth of $2 million, but you found a way to get yourself $200,000 a year in cash flow. And that's on an absolute baseline appreciation level of 2%. Most appreciation rates historically in the United States are right around 5%. So it's not unrealistic to think that on $10 million in real estate, you're going to see around $500,000 per year in increased wealth. So, all right, next piece. How much rent do I charge for my property? This is always a great question. This is really when we get down to brass tacks. Usually we're closing on the place, or getting under contract. We're actually out searching, getting things done. And so how much rent to charge? Well, there's a couple ways to do this. We run kind of a comparative market analysis, just like we do for selling a property. So we're going to use some of the major websites. We can use like Zillow and Trulia and Rent.com and Homes.com and Apartments.com, all the big major rental websites. And we can also use some of the local property management companies. Okay, so if we go out, find out what things are renting for currently, and what things are staying on the market or coming off the market quickly. We can also ask a property manager to evaluate the property and give us their thoughts on what they think the property would rent for. And then the next piece would be, there's some actual, calculators and things out there, rent calculators. So one of the ones that I use is rentometer.com. And Rentometer is a pretty cool resource that pulls historical rental listings from the websites and kind of puts them together to figure out which ones are in your area. And you can search for houses or apartments or duplexes or condos or whatever. And then it gives you the median, the average, the top 25 or the top 25% and the bottom 25% of rentals over a period of time. And you can see different rent trends and things like that. So You can get pretty close. In some of the markets that I work, I would say I get usually plus or minus $100. I can guess the rent by within $100 on some of these local markets, and so there's some great resources out there. Most of them are free. There's some paid resources as well. But getting hooked up with a real estate professional that already has access to these can help you out. So I have pro accounts for all these things, for example. So let's talk about how you find the right tenant. This one's really interesting. So I have some very strong thoughts on this. And what it comes down to is how you're going to rent the property. So if you're going to use a property management company or you're going to rent to people yourself, I highly encourage people to manage their own properties, at least when they first get started. And the reason being is if you're at least a semi-decent read of people, I think it's highly important that you have the conversation with the person that you are renting to. And the reason for that is because you can read character, okay? And when property management companies go and put somebody in a property or to accept an application, they're really looking at a few things. They're looking at their creditworthiness and their ability to repay. And that's really all they can look at because they're bound by some very tight fair housing guidelines and discrimination laws. And so they look at these financial aspects, and it's, can they afford it? And we have the historical, the historical proof or creditworthiness to show that they're going to make their payments on time? And if they check both those boxes, then they'll offer them a lease. I like to go a little bit deeper than that. I like to know the person. I like to know what type of person they are, and maybe have them tell me a little bit about their background and where they're from and what they do and that type of stuff. And that will tell you a lot about a person. It's very similar to a job interview. If you interview them about their last place that they lived, and if they spend the entire time bad mouthing their landlord and talking about what a crappy place it was, and that the landlord was, never took care of them or anything like that, you got to start to wonder, okay, well, is that how they're going to talk about me, right? And so think of it like a job interview. If they come in and you just don't think their character might be the right fit, then maybe hold off. Just because they're credit worthy, or just because they have make enough money, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a good fit. So if you can do that, if you're interviewing your own people, really try to judge character if possible. Character is not a protected class, right? And even when you're doing your own, managing your own properties, the discrimination laws really aren't that tight against an individual landlord, especially if you're living in the property, right? So if you're living in the property and you're just renting out like a room, the discrimination laws don't really apply, because it's okay for you to say, I'm looking for a male roommate. Now, when you're renting a home, you can't do that. You can't say girls only or boys only. That's gender discrimination, right? And so look up the fair housing guidelines and look up the local state guidelines as well to make sure that you're following, in those parameters, especially once you get to, I believe, don't quote me on this, you might have to look this up, but I believe it's based on it's either 3 or 4 properties. Once you own 3 or 4 properties, you're technically considered a professional landlord. And then at that point, you do have to follow all the federal housing guidelines and state housing guidelines. So, should I update my property before renting it out? This is a great question. The updating and repairing are probably 2 different things. Obviously, I think your property should be in good repair. I think you should put a fresh bead of caulk along all your sinks, fresh bead of caulk all along your tubs and your floors where water might get in. Try to avoid any water intrusion for people that aren't taking great care to block off areas where water might go into. That's just, again, kind of disrepair stuff. As far as the updating it, obviously, the nicer your property is, the higher it's going to rent for. It's just going to show better. People are going to look at it in a brighter light. It's going to look really, it's going to look really nice. So, but updating there are places where I stop, right? So I don't put quartz countertops in. I don't put granite countertops in. Things that, especially things that can be easily damaged and are expensive to replace, right? So, you drop a pot or a pan on a granite countertop, and now all of a sudden you got a big chip out of it, and it almost ruins your whole countertop. And so those things I don't worry about as much. I would prefer a laminate countertop, something that I almost don't mind if they destroy, because I'm eventually going to put nice countertops in it. So, don't worry about that too much. And when you do go make, try to get through a couple rounds of renters before you make any major improvements. So, for example, if you buy a place with carpet in it that maybe is on the verge of needing replaced, see if you can get one or two renters out of it, and maybe, allow them to have dogs, allow them to have cats. And if they destroy the carpet, so what? Next time they move out, you're going to be replacing it anyway with an LVP of some sort. So, that's kind of my advice on the, updating the property. But I think little things make a big difference. Like I said, caulking things, making it look pretty, is very helpful. Paint is always really good. Just, a nice neutral paint, and then nice fixtures. Get rid of the old dated brass, and put some brushed nickel or something in there. Those things will definitely help. So. Should I hire a management company? Again, that's up to you. I think as you get more and more, disinvolved with the properties, it may not be a bad idea, but for your first couple, I would encourage you not to. And I think what you'll find is that, hiring a management company is going to cost you more money than the time it's worth. If you treat people right, and if you do things the right way, renting out a property, and you're going to have 10, 15 hours a year, maybe, into the property. It's not that big of a deal. And, your management company is going to take probably 10% of gross rents off the top. So if you're renting something for $2,000 a month, they're going to take $2,400 a year. I know for me, for $2,400, like I'll work the 10 or 15 hours, a year to not pay that. So the other piece is that people get worried about is that, the late night calls that, the toilet's not working, or that the furnace isn't working, or something like that. First of all, I think that those fears are a bit unfounded. People, for the most part, are pretty reasonable about not calling you at 3:00 in the morning. The reality is, if the furnace goes out at 3:00 in the morning, I'm not going to be able to get anybody there until, the morning anyway. The only emergency calls I want at 3:00 in the morning are a pipe broke and the house is flooding and I don't know where the shutoff valve is. But I make sure they all know where the shutoff valve is. So any major emergencies they should be able to take care of, and then they can call me, when it's more of a reasonable hour. But I don't know that I've even ever had one. Maybe I've had one on kind of unreasonable hour call emergency, but if I have, I don't even remember it. So the management company piece, they're really just there to collect rents and find you tenants, which I already talked about. I think you should find your own tenants, and I think it's easy to collect rents. I literally I use Venmo. People just Venmo me money, and that's it. And then for issues, what happens if you have issues at the property? Who fixes them? So again, with a management company, they usually have a vendor list, or a bunch of people that can go out and do work. Now, obviously, you could go do that stuff too, but even if you didn't want to deal with that stuff, and that's probably the biggest stress that I had to get rid of, was somebody calling and needing something fixed, and I had a really busy week, and I was like, I don't have time to go out and do that. It was I needed to find somebody. And so for one, I have a really big vendor list that I'm always willing to share. So, if you're listening to this and you're looking for somebody to help, need somebody to paint or go put some floors in or install a dishwasher, we have people for that. So getting a list together. But the big thing that I do is I make sure that all of my properties at all times have home warranties on them. And the benefit of a home warranty is that I pay one lump sum per year. It's around $500 a year per property. And then I pay $100 service call anytime something happens. But the benefit is that I don't have to call around, find someone who's available, ask them what their prices are, have them go out and give me a quote, and then decide who's going to be best. I just put in a service call and they take it from there. When I put in the service call, I put in the tenant's name and information and say, contact the tenant. And I literally never hear from them again until I reach out to the tenant maybe a few days later and say, hey, just want to make sure you get that problem fixed. And the reality is like it takes so much stress off you to be able to do that. And for me, it's like a peace of mind. If it's $500 a year and $100 a service call, and let's say I spend 3 service calls a year, that's $800 a year that I pay, and it's almost like prepaid maintenance. But it does a couple of things. I never have any big costs, right? So if my furnace goes out, warranty replaces it. I don't pay anything. I pay the $100 service call. That's it. If my water heater goes out, warranty replaces it. If my AC goes out, my water heater or my warranty replaces it. So the warranty covers all the major items in your property, and will keep you from having to come big out of pocket and having to find a contractor that's going to get out there and do it in a timely manner. Okay. All right. I think last question for today. Last question is, should I buy short-term or long-term rentals? I think that's very subjective. There's a lot of difference in opinion. If Matt and Charlie were here, they would tell you to buy short-term rentals. They're killing it in short-term rentals. I prefer long-term rentals, and I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you my concerns about short-term rentals. My thought on long-term rentals is that I've always been a buy and hold strategy type of person, right? I've never had this like get rich quick mentality. And so I just know if I acquire enough property that I can cash flow $500 a month off of each property, I can do pretty well. If I just do one for $500 a month, it's not going to change my life. But if I do 20 at $500 a month, it'll change my life. And so it's kind of long game for me. Short-term rental properties to me seem just a little bit more short game. They're not long game. I do like the opportunity that if a short-term rental didn't work out, you could potentially turn it into a long-term rental. But that only works if you're in a market where a long-term rental would actually work. If you're going to a destination, for example, like let's say you have a short-term rental in Breckenridge, and it doesn't work out as a short term, well, it's probably not going to be any better as a long term, right? So it's a little different. Now, if you get a local property where you can go, I can always revert back to a long term rental and make money there, then yeah, I agree. I think you're hedged properly, and you're going to be able to be okay on either side, whatever side you go with that. So between the short term and the long term, the reason I like the long term is because once I sign that lease, I know that I don't really have much to do for the next year. I just may have to make a couple of service calls, and heck, that client may be, or that tenant might be willing or wanting to stay in the property for 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years. And so that's a great scenario. And all I have to do is renew the lease every month or every year. With the short term, it takes a lot more involvement. There are lots of different companies and different apps and things that you can use to really streamline the process to not make it such a big deal, which is great. The other benefit is if you're running a short term, generally your property is getting cleaned, like professionally cleaned every week. Your property is just going to get maintained that much better with short term renters. So that's a huge benefit. And then obviously the other big benefit is a lot of times there's more money there. The downfall to it is you have to put stuff in it. You have to put couches and plates and silverware and cooking utensils and cutting boards and everything you can think of. You have to fully furnish the house. And for me, that's something that I'm not sure what the ROI looks like on that. I've never really run it before because I've never really been interested in running short-term rentals. But I know in some of them it can be really big. The other concern is that for me in short terms, the more people that you have in the house over a period of time, the more likely it is that something goes wrong. And let me just put this, let me give you a worst case scenario. And I don't want this to seem like I don't want to be like the media here, like scaring everybody out of short-term rentals. But one of the things that has always made me a little bit nervous is you have lots of people in and out. You just get one bad nut and it can really ruin your deal. So you get somebody, for example, that goes in to your property for a week or whatever, and they decide that they're going to smoke some meth. right? Or cook it, who knows? Okay, that house, now that there's been meth in that house, has got to be remediated to the standards of the state of Colorado and to some federal standards as well. And basically what that means is that that house has to be ripped down to the studs. Everything in the house has to come out. Ceiling fans, light fixtures, appliances, everything has to come out, because meth is so toxic that they have to rip everything out that came into contact with the smoke or whatever was in there. So they have to rip the house down to absolute studs and rebuild it. And it's generally not something that's going to be covered by your property insurance. And so to me, it's a very significant risk. The more people we put in there, the more chances or opportunities we have somebody to do something extremely detrimental to the property. That, I would look back in hindsight and go, man, I wish I just would have long-term rented that property. So anyway, that's just my opinion. There are plenty of people out there doing great short-term rentals, especially destination short-term rentals, and they're making a lot of money, and they'll probably refute me on that all day. But that's just my personal opinion. And I am a big believer that slow and steady wins the race. So anyway, that is all the questions for today. I hope that maybe answered some burning questions that you've had regarding the process. And I think that hopefully that'll give you some clarity on what to expect when you're running your small rental portfolio or your large rental empire. So appreciate everybody tuning in today. And please remember to check out our website for your free investor guide. Great opportunity to become your own landlord and not have to hire a management company. Remember, you can get that resource guide at www.blackyettigroup.com/resources. That's where all the podcasts are hosted as well. And you'll see the free resource guide below that. So anyway, the weather is beautiful. Summer is coming. I'm going to go out and live big today. Go hit some golf balls. So hope everybody has a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Live Big podcast. For even more real estate and investment resources, go to blackyettigroup.com/resources and download Nick's complete guide to running your own rental properties. Tune back in next week for another episode, and until then, live big.
Live Big does not provide investment, legal, or tax advice, and nothing herein should be construed as being financial, legal, tax, or other advice. Live Big does not represent that any securities or services discussed are suitable for any investor. No investment or other decision should be made solely based on the contents or information found on the website or podcast. When making a decision about your investments, you should seek the advice of a professional financial advisor or qualified expert.